The Blue Hour Pact. I used to believe that every marriage, if you listened hard enough, had a signature hour, some small daily window when the world thinned and the truth could cross the street without looking both ways. For Myra and me, that hour was just after sunset and just before the city remembered to turn on its neon. We called it our Blue Hour. We'd walk the 3 blocks to the river and lean our elbows on the cold railing and take turns saying one true sentence. Sometimes it was grand. I want to live in another country while we are still young enough to get lost. Sometimes it was ordinary. I want pasta, not salad. But the rule held, one truth each, then we could go back to what everyone else called the evening. The last year we had together, the Blue Hour moved. It kept showing up in the middle of the day like a reminder from a calendar I hadn't created. The light got strange in rooms where it never had. We'd be washing coffee cups at noon and suddenly the air would thicken the way it does before rain. Myra would tilt her head like she was trying to hear what she'd misplaced. I'd feel a tremor in my chest, a glass set down too hard inside me. I thought at first that the city had become more beautiful. I was wrong, it was becoming more honest. My name is Jonah. I arrange sound for a living, I make rooms behave. Concert halls, galleries, offices with too much echo, I go in and teach them to hold their breath or to exhale slower. It means I notice whispers other people ignore, the uneven hum of a fridge, a window's small complaint against its frame, a lie that's learned how to wear the right shoes. Myra was a brand director for a beverage startup that sold optimism in glass bottles. She was quicker than me and better at rooms. Give her a crowd and 10 minutes and she'd find the 4 people who would change her life. I loved watching her do it. I love watching anyone do what they were born for. We had 2 rules that we said out loud and 1,000 others we never named. The first rule was the Blue Hour. The second was the ledger, not a real book, we didn't write anything down. It was a joke at first, then a charm. Whenever a day felt complicated, we'd put our palms together, fingers mismatched like a dovetail joint, and say, do the numbers add up? Sometimes the answer was not yet. Sometimes the answer was close enough, let's order dumplings. It made us feel like we were auditing the universe, and it was almost passing. The last autumn started with a small, boring thing. Myra asked me to fix our budgeting app after dinner because the counters on her phone had stopped talking to her watch. I updated the app, recensed, hit refresh. I wasn't snooping, I swear I was, but the dashboard opened on her end-of-month summary and as if it had been waiting its whole life to be noticed by me, one line came dressed as a siren instead of a number. Featherlight Studio, 6 charges in 2 weeks. It's a photo studio in the Arts District. I knew it because one of my clients, an installation artist with a gift for fog, had used it for a catalog shoot. The studio did portraits, 2 couples, newborns, anniversaries. The little purchases were for studio time, equipment, prints. Myra's agency sometimes booked shoots there for campaigns, so it could have meant nothing, except the payments had run through her personal card. I heard the fridge hum, off-key by a hair. I noticed. I put the phone down too carefully. She was at the sink in an old camp t-shirt, hair up with a pencil. She turned and smiled at me, the kind of smile you hand a person when you have 2 conversations in your mouth and you're deciding which one to give them. Rescued? She asked, nodding at the phone. All better, I said, one truth later. The next week I found a paper bag from a French bakery in the recycling. It was folded into a neat square that suggested it had once been a small altar. The bag smelled like butter and something else, orange peel. I smoothed it and saw 2 grease moons side by side. It wasn't my business to count pastries. I did anyway. The ledger started tallying itself, quiet as ash. I wasn't naive. We'd been married long enough to have drifted and then found our way back, long enough to have said I'm not myself lately and meant it. We had a spring, just one, in which we had lived on opposite sides of our own bed and called it sleep. We knew the difference between fatigue and frost, but this was new. It felt like waking up to find that the wall where your mirror always hung had become a window and led directly into someone else's morning. If you want to know why I didn't ask her right away, the answer is both simple and embarrassing. I didn't want the reasons. Reasons are the worst you get for your money part of a confession. They turn the thing into a story you have to sit through. I wanted the truth without the brochure. I kept our rituals. I kept my hands busy. I tuned a gallery where every wall was raw concrete and the artist wanted the room to sound like a held-in breath. I carried acoustic panels up 3 flights and whistled in corners to make sure the space gave me back the notes I sent. I texted Myra a photo of a bolt of late light falling across a pile of insulation like it had just discovered velvet. She responded with a gif of a cat winking and then a "save me a corner of that for my office, it looks like a nap." I put my phone away before I could read it like a press release. I went by Featherlight. It was a gray day that made everything feel like it was underwater. The receptionist recognized me from a corporate shoot I'd done a year earlier. "Back to fix us?" she asked. The cyclorama squeaks when couples practice their first dance. "I'm here for paper samples," I lied smoothly, and she handed me a fan of matte and pearl and dove and creams that had names like rain. On the way out, I saw a man standing in Studio B, adjusting a light with the concentration of a surgeon and the hair of a person who had learned what to do with his own beauty. He wore a dark shirt, sleeves rolled. He looked into the lens his own and smiled the way someone smiles at a friend they're surprised to like again. The receptionist said, "That's Sarin if you ever need portraits that make you look exactly like your favorite self." I nodded like I was filing a contact for work. The name felt like a note I'd heard recently in a room I couldn't place. I didn't hire a private investigator. I didn't follow my wife. I checked the fridge light and found a second bottle of white wine in the back that neither of us drank, a noble grape that believed in summer. I checked the smart lock logs because the manufacturer had sent a warning about battery life. The lock keeps a polite record. Door locked at scene-appropriate times, door unlocked by Myra's phone at hours that suggested other doors too. Once, locked at 3 in the morning from inside. We don't lock from inside unless we're teaching each other safety. I told myself a lot of things. She's leading a shoot. She's saving her team the Uber home. She's in charge of 70 problems daily and has learned how to stack them like plates. Also, I told myself if she were having an affair, she'd be cleverer. We both laughed at that when we were still us. Then came the blue hour that did not wait its turn. Myra had said she'd be late, first to pitch, then a dinner where no one is hungry. I cooked for one without being dramatic about it and then did the thing I always do when I'm trying to keep myself honest. I took a walk. The river has 3 bridges in sight from our spot. Some evenings, couples lean together there and invent the future. Other nights, old men stand with their hands in their pockets and watch the water remember them. I was near the 3rd bridge when I received a video message by mistake. That's what the phone announced, by mistake. The clip was only a few seconds long. In it, Myra's face was so close to the camera that her cheek became a landscape. There was laughter, hers, and a deeper laugh layered under, along with that expensive hum rooms get when they're dressed for pleasure. She said, "Don't film, you idiot, you're the one who knows how optics work," and the clip cut out on a kiss I couldn't see but could hear. Kisses make a sound if you've been listening to Rooms most of your life. I watched the video 3 times and then deleted it, which is a worshipful act when you know about clouds. I stood on the bridge while the river kept being good at its job. My one true sentence for the hour was quiet, but it was there. I said it out loud to the water. "It's happening." When she came home, she was flushed from wine and weather. She put her bag down and kissed the corner of my mouth like a person arriving at a station but not getting off there. "I'm sorry I was late," she said, "not sorry. My boss is learning not to be the loudest in a room she pays for." "How was the pitch?" I asked, and she gave me 3 adjectives that belonged to different pizza places: bold, fresh, authentic. I made coffee and asked if she wanted a cup. "I shouldn't," she said, and took mine from my hand and drank half inside like a person signing a treaty with the day. She reached for me then with that old, unthinking hunger, and my body, traitor or loyalist depending on whose country you live in, reached back. We made out against the counter like kids who believe in countertops. We held each other's wrists when the mouth wanted the neck. I tasted citrus and something woodsy and decided, doggedly, not to become a detective in my own kitchen. When it would have turned into sex, she stepped back and breathed like a runner who thought she'd hit the tape but found more road. "I have an early call," she said. "Rain check." "Sure," I said, and we both smiled like people who knew we'd already spent the rain. I'll spare you the part where I put my head on the kitchen table and tried to listen to the wood for instructions. I kept breathing, I kept working. I tuned a lecture hall so that questions from the back could find their way to the front without carrying tiny megaphones. I built a soundscape for a museum exhibit about whales. The recorded moans were beautiful and obscene in equal measure. One afternoon, I mixed 2 tracks by accident and discovered that when a whale sings at a certain pitch under the sound of a train in an iron bridge, you get an emotion I don't have a common name for. I wanted to call it grief with a horizon. Here's how revenge came to me, not as a fantasy of public humiliation or as a spreadsheet of losses I planned to recoup. It came as a design brief. I woke one morning with the problem statement fully formed in my head. How do you meet a lie with the right amount of light? How do you make a room that refuses to host pretending? I booked Featherlight Studio for a Friday we had once set aside for a weekend trip that evaporated into everyone's calendars. I hired a small crew I trusted to run lights and sound without asking questions, the kind of people who believe in NDAs and dignity. I sent Myra an invitation that looked like a brand launch, an embossed card with just our names, the words Our Blue Hour, and the studio address. Wear the dress you love for no reason, I wrote. I'll wear the shirt you call dangerous. In the days before, I sat with the ledger that wasn't a ledger and copied it all out by hand in fountain pen. Dates, places, the little kindnesses you extend to a person you plan to betray, leaving early to give you space, buying their favorite yogurt without making a show of it. I wrote down the sound of her voice in the mistaken video and the way the laugh underneath brought the room 1 inch closer to my ear. I wrote down my desire too because I wanted a document that remembered that this had been a love story and not just a lawsuit. I didn't invite Soren, he invited himself by existing. He'd been in Myra's orbit at events before, the kind of collaborator whose name traveled lightly. He has a partner, a woman with perfect posture and a haircut I could never afford. I didn't invite her either. That wasn't the point, though. I thought about it and then left it alone like a switch in a museum labeled "Do Not Touch if you ever want to sleep again." Featherlight looked like a promise when I walked in. White walls, seamless backdrop, the kind of clean only spaces maintain that are used to making mess for a living. I set a chair in the center and a small table to the side. I asked my light tech Kara to give me something like Morning in a City 3 days after rain. She grinned and did it in 9 seconds. You're either filming a breakup or a car commercial, she said. Either way, don't let your subject improvise. Myra arrived astonishing in a dress the color of someone's first memory of saltwater. She always did elegant like she had a patent. She kissed me, a public kiss, pressed and camera ready. What is this? She asked. She warned me more than once. She hated surprise parties, loved surprises that looked like planning. I thought we were going away. We are, I said, for an hour. She spotted the chair and the table and the envelope waiting there and understood something important and not yet enough. She took a step back like she was making room for a fight neither of us could win. Jonah, she said, warning me against becoming someone I would hate later. I nodded to Kara, who did what the best texts do. She disappeared, and yet the light did what I needed. I sat. Myra stood. A camera rolled, but only for us. I told her the story of the past months like it was a film I'd been scoring. I gave her the sounds, wallets tapping turnstiles far from home, a key card sighing into a hotel lock, a bottle cap small celebration, laughter under her laughter. I said her name and mine softly so I didn't bruise them more than necessary. I did not make myself the sheriff. I refused the role of criminal for her too. I told her, a person listening for the room's truth. When I got to the mistaken video, she closed her eyes. She put a hand flat on her belly and pressed like she was stopping a stampede from escaping. I was going to tell you, she said finally. I know, I said, but you weren't going to stop. She didn't argue. There's a kind of grace in surrendering the wrong hill. What do you want me to say? She asked. Your one true sentence, I said, for our blue hour. She lifted her chin like someone adjusting to new weather. I was lonely, she said, and it was both more and less than I'd hoped for. And then I got addicted to not being. Loneliness is the world's most common drug. It makes saints, thieves, and artists in equal measure. It makes lovers who will throw a life they planted with their own hands into a landfill and call it compost. I nodded. I told her mine. I loved you so much I stopped needing light, I said. I got good at the dark, that's on me. She swallowed. I didn't want to ruin us, she said, and I said the thing that ended the trying. You already did. I slid the envelope toward her. It wasn't a subpoena, it was a map. In it I'd written the ways we could proceed, gentle, fair, fast. I'd written the guardrails I needed, no lying to friends to protect anyone's PR, no slandering the marriage we had so we could feel righteous about leaving it, no repeating the story in rooms that would feed on it. I asked for the apartment until the lease ended, and for the records collection because the turntable had always belonged to my hands. I told her I'd keep health insurance on her for as long as my plan allowed because I refused to weaponize paperwork. I asked that we tell her mother together. I asked that she stop coming to the river at Blue Hour, not forever, but for a while, so the water could learn another name for us. She cried then, not loudly, not performatively. She cried like someone had opened a tap inside her and didn't know yet how to close it without breaking the handle. She pressed her fingers to her mouth and nodded. Okay, she said, and then "I'm sorry" in a voice that made the room consider compassion, and then "I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight," a sentence as beautiful as any prayer. We walked out of the studio together like siblings. In the parking lot, she took my hand and placed something small in it without looking at me. It was a key card in a hotel sleeve. "I forgot it was there," she said, "honesty's back pay. I put it in my pocket, I still don't know why. Maybe I wanted a souvenir from the museum where we decided not to live." There are shorter versions of what came next. This is the long one. I moved into our spare room and slept like a person who had volunteered to be a ghost for a while. I recorded sea sounds at dawn for a documentary about coral that had been asked to pretend for too long that the water was fine. I ate soups friends left on my doorstep, sometimes at 3 in the morning because time was a rumor. I didn't drink more than 2 drinks at a time because I wanted to keep my agreement with the future. I would arrive at it sober. I told the truth to my sister, who swore like a sailor and then delivered a cake the size of a small grievance. I told the truth to my father, who said, "Marriages are experiments, the heart is made of labs." I told the truth to the couple who were our best friends, who looked heartbroken in the face for me and then for themselves because grief is communicable. I did not tell the truth to strangers, I let strangers be safe. A week after the studio, I went to pick up a new set of acoustic panels from a craftsman in the old brewery district. While he wrapped the last one, I took a left instead of a right and found myself in front of a little shop whose sign wasn't trying very hard to be a sign. It was a perfumery. I went in because the day asked me to. Naya stood behind the counter measuring a resin with the seriousness of a judge. She had the kind of beauty that gets handed to a person who can be trusted with it. The shelves held bottles with labels that said things like "salt on wood" and "the city after rain." The room smelled like memory doing math. "I make custom scents," she said, and I laughed a little at how lucky the day had decided to be. For people who like their ghost stories to tell the truth. "What would you make for a person who's trying to retire from haunting?" I asked, and she didn't flinch. "A base that belongs to them," she said, drawing 3-dropper bottles like a magician with ethics. "Something warm but not heavy." She paused, sniffed the air around me like a non-threatening animal. "You carry cedar and iron and last week's storm." "Not a bad band name," I said. "Cedar and iron and last week's storm." She smiled and offered me her wrist. "Jasmine Absolute," she narrated, a single drop I could barely smell until my head tilted. "Cedarwood, Virginia, a ribbon of labdanum so there's a place to land." She added a molecule that, she explained, suggests salt without making you crave French fries, and then pushed the strip toward me. I closed my eyes. The scent opened the room inside my chest I'd been sleeping in and changed the sheets. I started stopping by, first because she was building the scent, and then because she was building it with me in the room, and then because the room felt like a blue hour on purpose. We didn't flirt, and then we did, the way you add a spice to a soup and discover it was always meant to be there. She spoke to the air like it was a colleague. I talked about wood grain like it held a small theology. We traded quiets. The first time I touched her was not romantic in any routine sense. She was showing me the maceration of a tincture she'd started months earlier, and the jar slipped. I steadied it from below and she steadied my hand, and we both waited an extra beat before letting go, honoring the useful excuse for what it also was. The next time there was no excuse. In the doorway at closing, she reached up and tucked a stray hair behind my ear as if she were adjusting a microphone. I didn't move. Her fingertip traced the shell of my ear and kept traveling, a slow line along my jaw, a question that my body answered by standing very still and breathing differently. We kissed in the back of the shop on a Tuesday. The kiss wasn't fireworks. It was a confident match struck in a room that had always been meant to be lit. She tasted like orange peel and patience. We let our mouths learn each other's language syllable by syllable, which is to say we left room for accent and the occasional mispronunciation, and we laughed softly when our teeth knocked. My hand found the back of her neck and rested there. There are conquests, there are claims, there are also permissions. This was that last kind. When she said, "Stay," I didn't. I walked home with a bottle in my pocket and my hands in my coat, and the feeling you get after saying the bravest sentence of your life to a room only you could hear. The next day I went back because desire is a tide, and you either stand there and argue or you get into a boat and learn what a tide expects of you. If you need the scene where we undress each other, I can write it and keep it soft. We took our time. The body is a ledger too. It tells you what has been paid for in attention and what is owed interest. She kissed the places I had not noticed in months, my temple, the base of my throat, that small country between shoulder and chest that the right mouth turns into a headline. I learned the curve of her back with a reverence that had nothing to do with absolution and everything to do with finally using my hands for the work they were made for. We discovered a pace that felt native to us. We stopped when we wanted to stop and started when stopping was a misunderstanding. Light found every freckle she'd entrusted to my eyes. Afterwards, we lay with our shins overlapped like polite neighbors and said small, truthful things into the ceiling, which received them without comment like ceilings do. I told Myra about Naya before anyone could weaponize the calendar. We sat in the living room we were dividing in our minds and I said, "I've met someone I will go slow with." She looked almost relieved. "Good," she said. "I was afraid you'd try to be holy about this." I shook my head. "Just being human," I said, "which is the harder job." We did the paperwork. We sold the bike we pretended made us more interesting. We divided plants like children in a kinder divorce than the one we were performing. She took the fig tree that loved the window she'd always known how to open. I kept the pothos that had thrived on my neglect. We set up meetings with a lawyer who said, "The kindest contracts anticipate future generosity." I believed her. We signed our names on pages that asked us to be brave in writing. I avoided the river at twilight for a while. I couldn't risk running into my own previous life smoking a cigarette under a coat we used to share. I walked mornings instead. The city looks honest before coffee. Cars wear their shadows like hats they haven't remembered to remove. Once at sunrise I saw Vera, the woman whose laugh had harmonized with Myra's in the video, sitting on a bench with her arms crossed tight over herself like she was cold or proud or both. I kept walking. Mercy is a form of discipline. Myra moved into a smaller place 2 neighborhoods away. Enough distance not to get mail in each other's boxes by accident, close enough to borrow a sweater on a freak cold day. We didn't become friends, not right away, but we became something worse and better, witnesses. We exchanged photos sometimes. She sent me the first plant that thrived under her care. I sent her the acoustic panels in a new client's studio arranged like an accidental sunset. She sent a picture of a cup on her windowsill with a caption that read, "Learning to want less." And I sent back a picture of my hands making bread with "learning to want more." With Naya, the days built themselves without hurry. We had Tuesdays where we cooked something that made us tear up from garlic and Fridays, where we put on records that taught our hips patience, and Sundays when we both went quiet for hours, and then re-entered each other's attention without apology. I kept reaching for her wrist to kiss the inside where the scent sat like a secret, and she kept making the secret again, a fresh version, as if to say, "The present is the only temple that doesn't charge admission." Revenge, in the end, was a piece of music I didn't compose. There was no spectacular outing, no gallery show where Soren's face fell in slow motion, no viral moment where I performed virtue in front of an audience hungry for blood. My revenge was a blue hour I took back and renamed. It was the knowing that if I stood by the river at twilight, I could find a sentence that was true and say it out loud and not be punished by lightning. On the first equinox after the divorce, I walked to our old spot with Naya. The river did not try to make it awkward. We leaned on the railing, our coats touching, the city making its long agreement with the night. She said one true sentence because I had told her about the rule. I took my time. "I am not forgiving in order to return," I said. "I am forgiving in order to arrive." She nodded like the sentence had landed where it needed to. She offered her own, "I don't want to be your future in opposition to your past." There it was, the kind of sentence that disarms every outfit in a closet. I kissed her forehead, a wordless yes. The spring after that, I ran into Soren at an opening for a photographer we both respect. He was with his partner, who had the look of someone who had forgiven and also gotten a better apartment out of the deal. He saw me and, to his credit, walked over to shake my hand. "I messed up my lighting," he said. "We all do sometimes, I'm sorry." "You don't owe me the performance," I said, not unkindly. "I'm not your audience." He blinked, smiled a little, and said, "Fair." We looked at a photo of a woman standing in a kitchen holding a lemon like it was too heavy and discussed lenses until it was safe for him to leave. Afterwards, Naya and I walked home slowly and she said, "You handled that like a person who knows his own instrument." I liked the metaphor and her mouth when she said it. There's a scene I keep returning to when I think of the year everything changed. It is not the studio. It is not the kiss in the perfumery's back room. It's an afternoon with no weather in particular. I am sitting at the table with the bottle Naya built for me open on the wood between my hands. The apartment is clean the way clean feels when it's a style rather than a panic. Music is playing at a volume that makes the walls relax. The phone is face down in the middle of the table, not because I'm trying to impress anybody, but because I would rather be here than anywhere else the phone could invent. The window is open and the city is practicing its scales. I lift the blotter strip, inhale, and am transported not to a foreign, perfect place but to my own house. Salt, cedar, a ribbon of sun-warmed resin. The smell of a room where the truth sits on the couch with its socks off and laughs at something small you said that nevertheless contained the entire day. I realize, and here I am probably guilty of making my life sound like a short film, that I am happy. Not because I won or because anyone lost. Because the ledger finally adds up and I didn't have to lie on a single line. If you're reading because you're standing on your own bridge, and your phone just handed you evidence that love can be both real and unfaithful, here is the only advice I allow myself to give. Keep your rituals but change your rooms. Take your blue hour and move it if you must. Say one true sentence to water or wood or a wall that has always been kind to you. You do not owe the world a performance of devastation any more than you owe it a performance of triumph. You owe yourself a chair in a good light and the steady work of making a life that doesn't require shadows to look interesting. Myra wrote to me last month. I'm moving again, she said. Smaller place, more sky. I wished her luck. That didn't sound like a benediction. She asked how I was and I told her because I don't believe in making up data points. I like the way my rooms sound now. She sent back a heart I chose to read as grateful rather than nostalgic. When we see each other in the wild, because of course we do, cities are lazy about keeping ex-lovers apart. We nod like people who have shared a raft and endured a storm and then chosen, sensibly, to make their next journeys in different boats. On the wall above my desk there is a small framed card. The embossing is worn but you can still make out the words "Our Blue Hour." It's a relic from a plan that became a mercy. I keep it there not to remember what broke but to remind myself what we were trying to keep alive all along. The commitment to tell the truth once a day. I look up at it before I leave for work, touch the frame like a superstition, and go teach rooms how to be kinder to the people they hold. Some days I succeed. Others I just keep listening until kindness becomes the only sound left. Naya keeps a bottle of my scent on her counter, and swears she uses it when she edits other people's formulas, because it reads like a clean sheet of paper. I keep a small vial of the orange absolute she favors in my pocket and dab it on the inside of my wrist before shows and hard conversations, because it reminds my blood that sweetness exists without asking for permission. We still kiss in kitchens. We still laugh quietly in hallways while deciding not to make the hallway the point. We go to the river some evenings, but rarely at twilight. That time belongs to another story. We've made a new hour. Ours tends to happen when the first neighbor turns on a lamp and the last seagull decides for or against the rooftop. We say one true sentence each, we mean it, we let the city keep the rest.